Hello, I am John Najarian, and RebelCon 2022 is almost here. We do have a virtual pass. The virtual pass gives you full access to everything, all the streams. Hello, I am John Najarian, and RebelCon 2022 is almost here. We do have a virtual pass. The virtual pass gives you full access to everything, all the streams, the live trading sessions, all of our fabulous keynote speakers. So to learn more about what's going on at RebelCon 2022, whether you're in person or virtual, check out marketrebellion.com/Dallas. Bang. Hey folks, John Najarian here with Pete Najarian for the Rebels Edge. And Pete, they promised me that the clapper, that's the technical name for those things technically, Pete. It arrived down in Puerto Rico though. So I won't get it till I fly down tomorrow. But folks, you know what the Rebel Edge is all about. We're going to give you a 1 minute macro because that's all it's worth. And then we're going to talk about stocks, some unusual activity, and a little bit of sports. So, Pete, let's talk macro. Man, they're cracking the market yet again. People are worried about these rates skyrocketing, and even Gundlach is out there saying the Fed's gone nuts.
Well, Grundlock always has a lot to talk about when it gets to rates, for sure. And I'll tell you, how long have people heard us say this? Here's my macro minute in 5 seconds. The 10 years at 3.46, people are going to sell. That's what happens. That's the end of the macro minute for me, John.
Well, I think that about does it, Pete. We don't need more than that. So let's dive into Adobe because the earnings, Pete, were, pretty much in line. Digital media and marketing, these guys have PageMaker and a whole bunch of ways to publish stuff on the net. But they're spending a fortune on a company I never heard of, $20 billion. And just because I never heard of it doesn't mean it's a bad deal. But the fact that they're spending that much right now is why that stock is getting cracked.
Yeah, it's getting hammered, John. Matter of fact, last I looked, it might be lower, it might be a little higher, but it was down 17%. I mean, that's a pretty big number, right? With the earnings that were decent, and then you miss on sales, so you kind of understand that whole thing. But John, $20 billion for a company that you and I both, neither of us had heard of it, and $20 billion is still, even in this day and age, that's a big number. But also, let's just remember this, down 17%, it's still expensive for all those guys who talked about it so long and so much about what a great, here's the problem. It is a great company, but it trades at a 30 plus PE still, even after this thing. So when you get hit like that and you put out 20 billion and you're still trading expensive, I think that whole combination tells me it's going to be a ways before I start to get interested in Adobe right now, John.
Yeah, I like the reoccurring revenue side of their business, Pete, because you and I are guys that, really say, hey, that's something that you can kind of feast off of. But I agree with the spend right here, the fact that the PE is so high. And then, Pete, the turnover today, normal is less than 3 million, folks. It's already traded 20 million shares today. So people are heading for the exits, and there's only one door. So that means there's a panic. And that's not one that I think is a one-day event, Pete. I think you hold off. How about Wynn, though? Are you going to roll the dice on this one? I see that Credit Suisse is saying that this is perhaps one of the best values in gaming, and I don't disagree after the battering it took, Pete.
Yeah, John, anybody who knows, I love this name for a very long time before the pandemic. With the pandemic, not so much. As a matter of fact, I've been long gone since the pandemic started because of the fact that we knew there were shutdowns. Well, let's be real here. The shutdowns continue. It's not like they're not like us right now. When you look over there, John, to China and you see what's going on, they even shut down the casinos themselves in not too terribly long ago. So that's the problem. And that's a major problem. And at some point in time, they will be up. They will be running on a consistent basis. People will come back. I'm looking at this name myself, John, but I think a lot of people jumped in way, way, way too early. They thought it was too cheap, too fast. The problem was they were wrong. And the reason they were wrong was these shutdowns just continued. And all the stock has done is gone from what? The triple digits, mid triple digits, all the way down to like $55, something like that. John, when you lose 90+% of your revenue pre-pandemic in Macau, that's a problem. Now, they're doing great in Vegas, and that's fantastic. But Macau is where they are. That's where they make the bulk of their money. So until that gets fixed, I think that's one of these things where you've got to be very careful or layer in if you want a position in a name like this.
Yeah, it was down 55% year to date, Pete. In fact, truth be told, I was with the guy that used to run the hotels for Wynn yesterday for lunch over at the Yale Club out here in New York. So I don't know if I have insider information because he's not in that role anymore, but I think you're right. You can be slow to pull the trigger here, not like load the boat here at, as it pushes into the 60s. All right, Pete, Arconic. This is one that basically, it's aluminum, and aluminum goes into almost everything. And they're saying things are slowing down dramatically. And, why would they lie, right? I mean, when people are optimistic, they're optimistic. These guys are not trying to, lower the bar so they can just step over it, as Warren Buffett would say. They're instead, Pete, here sitting there saying, hey, our customers are saying we are cutting back. And that's why they gave the revenue, the forward guidance warning that they did. ARNC just getting cracked hard.
And the other thing, John, that also has to be mentioned is hyperinflation. Everything that they do depends on energy. Well, what has energy been doing? Going up, 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 and obviously some pullback and pausing. But generally, the direction has been straight up. That's a major problem for these guys. We heard from Nucor yesterday, by the way, talking about Nucor. Not so great. Now all of a sudden we hear this one from Arconic, and obviously they're based here, but they have huge exposure in Europe, John. If we think the problems with energy here are bad, just go and take a look over at what's going on in Europe. That is a complete cluster. It's a pain in the rear end for these guys, and that is going to be a hurdle that they're at someday they'll get over it, but it's still a real pressure for them going forward. That's why I think when you look at a name like this, you better understand that you are dependent on a lot of what goes on there is energy dependent for sure. And they stopped hedging, John. That's another issue as well.
Yeah. And folks, those of you who know about aluminum production know what Pete's talking about when he says energy too. It takes a heck of a lot of energy to make aluminum. It's a very energy intense process. All right, Pete, Store Capital. STOR. It's a REIT, so real estate investment trust. A lot of people like that because it, gives you like a 5% dividend yield. But you know what I don't like, Pete? A bunch of our friends have been recommending this one all year and then some. And even with the huge jump because of a buyout, it's almost back to break even on the year. Is that the way you want to invest, Pete?
No, and the other thing I'd say, John, is you know what? One of the very last things I ever look at is the dividend yield because it sucks you in and everybody looks at it and says, well, it's got a 5% dividend yield. Oh, this has got a 7% dividend yield. And they get all excited. That's not something to get excited about. You have to understand what that really means. And why does it go up, up, up? Well, when the stock goes down, 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 that's a major issue as well. And, Store Capital, interesting company. They do a great job with a lot of things. But when you look at the actual price of the stock and what that's done over the last, like you just said, it might recoup for the year to be unchanged. Maybe. That's not a stock that I want to be involved in, John.
Right. And Pete, I think both with the case of Arconic, which is telling us yet again that we're, in a recession or certainly heading into one, and the case of Store Capital, which, with a big fat dividend yield like that, still couldn't get out of its own way all year. if you're in denial, and not the river in Egypt, Pete, but you are seriously in denial if you don't think that these energy prices and the rest are impacting and holding us down into a lower recession for longer. That's just, sadly, that's the way it is. All right, I'm going to give you a fast one, Pete. Fuel Cell Energy, FCEL. Unusual activity in this one. They bought 4,500 of the next week expiring. When you and I are down at RebelCon, Pete, down in Dallas, we'll be seeing about this. This expiration is the 23rd, which is next Friday. They're buying the 450 calls with the stock at 449. In other words, right at the money. I like it. I bought those at the monies too, Pete.
John, charge point hits yet again. And as a matter of fact, it didn't hit once. It already hit twice. So in that category, John, you just talked about fuel cell. It's been that has been the theme of the day. It's kind of the EV space, throw in the batteries, all of that. And that's really what we're seeing in terms of the theme of unusual option activity. I'll give you a charge point. And 19 and a half are what they're buying today, John. They bought 15,000 of those calls for 50 cents. It's right where the stock is now. They're looking for a move and it's going to have to happen quick because these do expire almost immediately. But it's always something that we want to point out is what are we seeing? And we are seeing that they're looking forward to something in a negative tape, looking for something that could go to the upside. So charge point's definitely one that I'm interested in. Matter of fact, I'm in these calls. We'll see how it plays out. I have layered calls in charge point right now because it's hit so many times, John. But I like the path and the recent direction for this stock, which has been up, up, up.
Yep. Well, Pete, I'm here at this JetNet IQ, which is a private aviation specialty conference. There's about 240 people, which is a new record. Most of them are C-suite people, meaning, these are the leaders of these companies. Dassault, Embraer, Dassault, Gulfstream, you name it, Rolls-Royce, they're all here. And I'll be speaking to them tonight, Pete. But private aviation, there's a lot of things changing, but the demand is through the roof. And there's a lot of happy people downstairs right now because of that. So why don't you make some people happy, Pete, and help us make some money with some of your sports picks right now?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to be making you money, but I think what the game of the week for me, John, happens tonight. And the reason I say that is we've got a great matchup of young quarterbacks. We're going to have a lot of those this year, but how about the first week, for instance, for the Kansas City Chiefs? Pat Mahomes, who got all that money not too terribly long ago. Is he worth it? Oh, heck yeah, he is. This guy is unbelievable, John. Game one, he throws for 360 yards. He's dang near completed almost every single pass. And oh, by the way, 5 touchdowns, just to, add a little something to it. Touchdowns matter. Touchdowns always matter. People look at me sometimes, they're like, what do you mean by that? Russell Wilson threw for about 400 yards, had 1 touchdown. That's a problem. This is a guy who produces, and he produces all the time, John. And then he's going up against the Chargers. And I'll tell you what, when you look at young quarterbacks, John, and we look at a guy like Justin Herbert, he's kind of been lost a little bit from all the other names that we see. It's Josh Allen, and it's this name and that name, and everybody's going after these young names. This kid is a stud. He took care of what business he needed to take care of against the Raiders last week. Threw for a lot of yards himself, but they also ran for a lot of yards. I think this is going to be a fun matchup for the AFC, and it gives you a chance to see maybe one of the playoff games this coming year for the AFC as well.
Yep, I'm right with you, and I love Pete that, he has such a great relationship with Kels. They lost Tyreek the Streak, and I'm not just saying you can just reload because that's a special player, but the fact that Kels is out there, Pete, and he can hit that kid. He looks people off and then just kind of blindly throws it over to where he knows he's going to be. And they just have that relationship. I mean, it just works. And, that's what keeps those drives going, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Travis Kelce. He only had 9 catches for over 100 yards, John, 120 yards for a tight end. One of the top for tight end or receivers. And I'll tell you, these tight ends are free shows. You guys, 4 linebackers know. Those are the guys that you want on your team. If you've got a great tight end, you have a great opportunity to have a quarterback who's going to have a really good year. And obviously, Mahomes has been there with Kelce for this entire run. It's pretty impressive. So we're going to go to college football now, John. So we've got a must-watch for the week. I'm going to throw this on right now. I got my Krusty's hat. It's a feed store out here in Nebraska. I'm in Nebraska right now. I'm here for the Nebraska-Oklahoma game, John. It's going to be big.
Ooh.
The offenses are something that are really fun. Now, as bad as Nebraska is and the fact that they fired Frost, that's because of the fact that there haven't been black shirts in Nebraska probably for the last 10 years. And there aren't any this year either. So the offense probably is going to – they're going to have to really work hard to even stay in the game, let alone win the game. But you know what? My heart's with these guys at Nebraska. They fight hard, and they're great guys. And I know a lot of guys over at Oklahoma as well. But the game of the week has to be Texas A&M, John, going and having to play against Miami. First of all, Miami's ranked number 13 in the country. Everybody's excited. They got the new coach from Oregon who came back to Miami. It should be great, but Texas A&M is coming off that brutal loss that they had. They got beat by Appalachian State, and I only say that again and again and again because let's be honest, in the world we're in with a team with all the money that they've got, the money they put into their coach and everything they've done with NIL money and everything else, and they got beat by Appalachian State, John. It says a lot. By the way, Appalachian State had 315 yards against Texas A&M. Texas A&M had 180. Holy smokes. Can you do that? Really? So they've got to beat Miami this week. It's going to be a battle. It is in A&M again, so College Station. But what do you think about this game? Do they got a shot, or is this then they got to get to the SEC, John. Then all the cream puffs that one of them beat them, all the cream puffs are gone. Now they got to get into the SEC. I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah, well, Pete, what I'd say is we both know that the coach who got all that money, like you said, a lot of those players that are getting paid too are both embarrassed, the coaches and the players, and a lot of those coaches are probably just working those players. They probably ran them to death the first couple of days of the week, Pete. Now, obviously, they're laying off on Thursday and lightening up on Friday, of course, just walk through. But I think they're going to be ready. I'll be really surprised if they don't play a really tough Miami team right to the final gun. So if that underdog status plays out, I would be picking these guys to beat the line.
Yeah, it should be interesting. It's going to be another great weekend, John. We got a lot of football. I can't wait to get in the Huskers Stadium, Memorial Stadium with 5 of my friends. It's going to be great. And I can't wait to see Coach Osborne, an absolute legend, and a lot of the other legends that are there. I'll be over there tomorrow and Saturday. It's going to be exciting, but it's going to be a busy weekend of college football for sure.
You heard him, Pete. Pete said it. Busy weekend of college football. The markets, wow. Still people worried about the markets. We'll be back Monday, folks, with another Rebel Edge, 1 p.m. Eastern Time Mondays. Remember, Pete's The Take always comes your way at 10:30 a.m., and I'll be back with 3 at 3. Hey, we'll see you Monday. Let's make it a good one.